Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of new things in the maker world and the embedded world and projects that we find lovely. This is the first show that I've actually worn a jacket for because it has suddenly got very, very cold in the attic of dreams. Who'd have thought that starting a YouTube show in an unheated attic in Berlin would get a little bit difficult when winter came. But anyway, we got a very full show for you, so let's get started. This week we're going to start the show off with a little bit of news, because just as I was making the show, the news dropped that there is a new BBC microbit board, which is kind of cool. That's right, the microbit now has a version 2, which is nice because microbit's been quiet for a number of years. The last major update to microbit was in 2016. And yes, as you can see, meet the new BBC microbit, now with speaker and microphone. But that is not all. Although let's not skip over that too quickly. Built-in microphone and speaker is very, very cool, especially given the kind of projects that these boards are famous for. I mean, there was a time, very definitely, that these boards had the edge on Arduino for learning and for working with school kids and introducing kind of hardware to young minds. And in a weird way, despite the fact that microbit kind of fell off a bit, because it had the backing of the BBC and because it was in many schools, microbit was a lot of people's first hands-on experience with anything like this. But now, as you can see here, it has a sense and react to sound with the built-in microphone. It's also showing off the new 5x5 LED array they have in the middle of the board here, and a capacitive touch sensor, a bit like your phone, and more computing power. And the more computing power comes courtesy of the system on chip, which is a Nordic Semiconductor nRF52833. I'm not going to go through all of the features right now. It's a chip that we've mentioned on the show before. There's a few things that are using it, and they're just one of those general purpose great chips. Fast dual ARM Cortex. Well, I should just read it rather than try and memorize it. The actual specifications have been published here on cnxsoftware.com, which, by the way, if you're not familiar, one of the best sites online for just getting all the news for hardware quickly. Like, I have no idea how they are so on it. They're incredible. BBC microbit version 2 specifications of wireless MCU Nordic Semi NRF 52833 ARM Cortex M4 MCU clocked at 64 MHz, 128K RAM, 512 KB flash, Bluetooth 5.1 low energy connectivity, and then the display, the 5x5 matrix, as I mentioned, that's this thing here, this 5x5 matrix, and audio, built-in MEMS microphone and speaker, and then it has the same edge connector as all of the other microbits have had as well. And much like the old microbits, I think it'll have the same sensors on it. They have their accelerometer and magnetrometer. What's that word? I'm not having a good words day so far today, which isn't good for someone that has to talk on camera as part of their job. That's right, accelerometer and magnetometer. And one of the things that I did wonder actually is also answered in this little section here, or maybe it is a section slightly further down. Here we are, yes. Because of the chip, I know that this is a NFC capable chip, and so I wondered if that would be a part of it. And this is something that does actually, it is there. It can be configured using the SDK. It's disabled by default. So this will also be something that you can use for NFC projects as well. So obviously there'll be a fair bit to unpack with this new board, working out all of the different ways that it can be used. And as before, of course, this is aimed at education. This is aimed to be used in the classroom, but it's also great for people like us. These are fantastic little boards to play around with. My old microbit died a sad death a number of years ago, and I never bothered to replace it. So I will be very happy to get my hands on the version 2. Just the one thing that I think a few of you might be wondering, if you're teachers or if you've had boards in the past, if this is going to be compatible with old microbit code, it absolutely is. Everything that works with the MicroPython, or what was the other way you could program them? I have forgotten. Either way, I've already said that it is completely compatible. Latest microbit will fit right into your existing lessons and materials. All the existing make code blocks, that was it, and MicroPython code will work in the same way as they do on the original microbit. So as before, if you want to buy the microbit, you'll be able to get it from a local seller to you. Of course, that's going to vary depending on where you are in the world. However, the time that it's going to become available seems to be quoted at just around about a blanket November 2020, which is pretty soon. But yes, the original microbit was a fantastic board that I had a lot of time for and that I loved. I'm really happy that the project has been chuntering away in the background. I think a few people did sort of think, even though there was a lot of support for the microbit, that the original boards came out and that just might be the last of it. As you know, what with this being a project from the BBC, it's not your traditional sort of development place for coming up with hardware-based learning aids. I'm really erring and umming a lot today. I hope that clears up before I finish filming this episode. Yes, new BBC microbit. I'm so happy to see it. Check it out. Following on from that, more new hardware news, this time in the shape of an embedded vision shield for the Arduino Portenta H7. And as the name suggests, this is a shield for the Portenta H7, the Arduino board announced and launched earlier this year. Just before getting into it, since this came out before the show started, it's not something we've ever really talked about before, and I have never had hands-on experience with the Portenta H7. But to me, this always seemed to be Arduino's attempt to step into the slightly more higher-powered boards kind of region. There's a few STM32 based boards out there, and this is obviously their version of it, although it certainly has a few handy features. I'm not going to spend much time on it now because this is about the shield rather than the board itself, but the H7 in its name comes courtesy of the STM32 H747, I believe is the code, yeah, the H747 controller, which is a Cortex M7 running at 480 MHz and a Cortex M4 running at 240 MHz. So it is definitely no slouch at all. But yes, in short, this is way more powerful than your average Arduino board, and with the built-in GPU and the ability to attach screens to it and the onboard wireless, yeah, this is them really moving into single board computer territory, and it is a fairly exciting thing. So having quickly flown over what the Arduino Portenta H7 is, this is the embedded vision shield for it, and unsurprisingly it has a camera and a couple of microphones on it for seeing you and hearing you. It also can connect via Ethernet and long-range LoRa connection, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's unsurprising that this has appeared because, well, one, everyone is doing low-powered and small and kind of relatively low computing power inferencing now. The switch to that has been very sudden, and it's going to be in everything. Every single consumer device is going to have some kind of onboard machine learning. But again, there's good reason behind that. So, quick look at the key features and specs. It's going to have a micro SD card socket on it, and then the as aforementioned camera with that high sensitivity 3.6 micro bright sense pixel technology, whatever that is. A couple of microphones, connectivity via Ethernet or LoRa, and then it's pretty small, but obviously it's going to be the same size as the Portenta, as it is a shield for it, and it is pretty small. Now, I just noticed Ethernet version here, which presumably means you can buy one or the other, Ethernet or LoRa. That's something that I hadn't quite picked up on before. Now, the only thing really I have to say about this at this stage, having not seen it and it's only just been announced, is one thing I did think was quite cool is the idea that the unit itself has a low power motion sensing mode, which is there just completely self-contained, nothing to do with the Arduino Portenta itself. It just sits on top, and for as long as it has power, as soon as it detects motion, it will send a signal to one of the interrupt keys on the Arduino, waking it up again if it's in a deep sleep mode, which I thought was a very cool little idea. I'm sure it's not the first board to do this, but it's something that did catch my eye. But Arduino have now got it ready. It's actually ready for pre-order. And if you go to the Arduino store, you will see you can pre-order it, but I don't know exactly when this will be arriving. But given that everything else in the world right now seems to be coming in November 2020, I would imagine it's going to be around then. And of course, it was right in front of my face. The product will be available for shipment by the end of October. Now, moving on to a new board from Banana Pi. Now, I'm sure some of you know Banana Pi were one of the main competitors in terms of kind of Raspberry Pi clones early on. It seemed like for a little while there was a genuine idea in people's minds that maybe the Banana Pi would be the cheap alternative to Raspberry Pi or whatever. Now, of course, time has favored the Raspberry Pi, and with good reason. But Banana Pi boards have continued to improve, and there is one for almost every occasion at this stage. And the latest one they've just released is, well, see for yourself. So this AliExpress page is actually the page of SinoVoIP or SinoVoIP Co. They are the people who create Banana Pi. They're the ones that are listing this directly on AliExpress. And yes, this is a €16 SBC. And it seems to be, well, kind of incredible. So the first thing here is the Edgeless EAI80 chip. Now, as far as I know, this is the first board that has ever used this chip. Edgeless have just developed this. It's a dual Cortex M4F running at 200 megahertz with a side accelerator, a GPU or TPU, a little bit like the ones we talked about before that you get as USB plugins. So this is your equivalent of, you know, your Raspberry Pi with a TPU Google plugin to do inference for you. But this is all on the one chip. So yes, as well as the dual Cortex M4F at 200 megahertz, there is the CNN NPU, which is running at 300 megahertz, which is capable of 300 GOPS, or giga operations per second. If I'm going to continue waffling about this, you should at least have something to look at. So yes, this is the board, and as I said, it features this edgeless EAI80 chip, and it has a bunch of other things as well. I mean, the eagle-eyed of you will have already noticed the ESP8266 microcontroller on there, which it is using for Wi-Fi, and yeah, it also has a CAN bus, and USB 2 Type-C, which is for both powering and programming it. The ability to attach a Li-ion battery to it if you want, and then, of course, an LCD connector and a camera connector, and the 40-pin GPIO pins. Now, as it says here, the LCD connector is shared with the 40-pin GPIOs. I don't know exactly how that is. I haven't had a look at the datasheet of this yet. I don't know if it takes up all of them, or whether you'd be able to have an LCD screen and also some external sensors. But given what this is likely to be used for, I don't think that's too much of a problem. And the page does give some potential target applications like voice control and computer vision, inside AIoT, so edge computing, security, offline equipment control, and system monitor. My favorite one of this is wearable devices, because don't get me wrong, this board is relatively small. It's about the same size as a Raspberry Pi, but I still find the idea of having one on my wrist somewhat hilarious. But you understand where they're coming from here. This is trying to do on one board what the Portenta Vision Shield was trying to do by attaching a shield to the Arduino. But I wouldn't say that these are necessarily competitors, because this is targeting a completely different market. And the reason I say that essentially is just because if this is being launched as a consumer or hobby or maker focused board, there isn't really any information that would help people at the noob end of the spectrum like myself in getting this thing going. I'm actually fairly confident that if I did get one of these, I might be able to get some use out of it. But as it stands right now, it seems like all of this is very, very new. And getting it going, there are some actual sort of step-by-step guides out there. But it does seem like this is something that has actually been aimed more at developers of low-cost IoT smart devices. Yeah, I'm not saying that this isn't something that you should get. I mean, it's so cheap that I can't not get one of these. They are kind of fascinating and new, and I want to see if I can get something working out of it. But yeah, this is definitely something aimed, I would say, more at the industry than hobby people. However, if it does pique your interest, there is also a kit that they are selling. Coming in at $80, what's that in currency, I understand? €69.44. Yes, that makes much more sense. No, this is just a simple kit that comes with the board. It also comes with a little onboard camera, along with a 7-inch touchscreen and a power supply designed to run it all together. And this is obviously just a kit there for either hobbyists to be able to get everything in one go and try and get it up and running, or just a set development kit you could buy every developer on a team, for example, or whoever, just to kind of have all of those things in place to iterate over code and all of that kind of stuff. So 3 brand new boards, and it's funny how they sort of run the gamut from the microbit, which is purely educational, based at people with no knowledge getting into hardware, through Arduino, who are going through a sort of morph right now, having been the people that everyone went to for educational material, and now trying to move into things that are taken a bit more seriously by the industry, and through to this, which I still think is a very compelling board. I don't want to give you the idea that I don't think people should buy it, and I don't think it's good. It looks like they've come up with something very special here. Obviously, with the EAI chip being so new, it's very hard to say, because I don't have the kind of knowledge to look at the specs and say whether it's going to be good or not. And obviously, there aren't that many people with opinions on it on the internet yet, because this is the first board that has featured the system on chip. But yeah, this is an incredibly compelling thing for only $16, sorry. So that's going to be even less in real money. Yeah, there'll be a link to both this and the kit in the description, and as I say, they'll just be straight to the AliExpress pages, because that is what the company that makes this has decided to do, just put it straight on AliExpress. If you do want this wiki page as well, by the way, I will throw that in also. But if you ever need to find it, I found that just searching for the BPI EAI80 along with wiki takes you more or less straight to this wiki page. And now moving on to the Odroid N2 Plus, and luckily a part of the video that I don't have to do all of the explaining, because the fantastic Christopher Barnett of explainingcomputers.com has uploaded a video on the Odroid N2 Plus. And just a very quick whistle-stop tour of what the N2 Plus is. Now I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Odroid N2. It is a very powerful ARM-based single-board computer with a fantastic design. You can see here it has the heatsink just sort of plopped onto the back there. It is actively cooled. I'm not going to waste my time talking about it. Everyone's talked about the Odroid N2 and how amazing it is. And this is a update for the N2 Plus. And the N2 Plus has a few subtle differences. As you can see here, 2.4 gigahertz from 1.8 gigahertz, and then the second core is 2 gigahertz from 1.9 gigahertz, this being a dual core ARM Cortex device. And then there's a few other differences. But rather than me go through them all here, I will direct you back to the fantastic video by the aforementioned Christopher Barnett of explainingcomputers.com. And it's very difficult to talk about Christopher Barnett without starting to speak a little bit like Christopher Barnett. He's got a very distinct way of talking. It's incredibly clear, and it's no surprise that he is one of the most respected people for talking about this stuff on the internet. But anyway, rather than me devote any more time to it, I will just say, once you've finished watching this video, if you still have the time, head straight to the comments, the description of this video, and find the link to this. Just because, as always, it is a fantastic run through. He is very thorough, takes you through the hardware, also takes you through the software, and runs a few tests to see just how much faster it actually is. And yeah, I mean, these videos are always a pleasure to watch anyway, but if you are interested in the N2 Plus, this is definitely the best place to look. Not only is it a thorough review, it will give you some information essential to you if you do decide to get one of them when they come back into stock at the end of October 2020. Everything seems to be end of October or start of November at the minute. It's that special time of year. And speaking of a special time of the year, if you were looking for a Christmas present for a Raspberry Pi enthusiast, I think I might have found the perfect thing. You like how I did that link? I'm going to try doing links. Should I try doing links in the show? Smooth links? Maybe I shouldn't try and do links. But this is a very professional looking case for the Raspberry Pi 4 and looks very promising indeed. It fits the Raspberry Pi 4 as well as a 2.5-inch drive, SSD, or normal hard drive if you want. And one thing that's quite nice is that it comes with an Ice Tower cooler with it. The Ice Tower cooler being the very same cooler that I referred to in a video before about another video made by explainingcomputers.com. We're making a very tangled web here, aren't we? But yes, as you can see, it features a NUC style aluminium alloy case for better protection, and front and rear panels to ensure good Wi-Fi signal strength, built-in Ice Tower cooler with PWM fan, with air vents, support for drives, all ports on the back to reduce wire clutter. That's nice. I remember when I was talking about the Node server box in a show a few weeks ago, they moved all of the ports to one side of the Pi, which is a nice touch, and that's also here. 2 full-size HDMI ports. That's also nice, actually, that they're full-size ports. Presumably they have converters in there for that. And additional USB 2 ports for more hardware, safe shutdown and reset button. So yeah, this is basically what you want in a Raspberry Pi case if you're using it as a computer. What I have not seen on this so far is access to the GPIO pins. But that might not be a big deal for you. Anyway, as I was looking at this, I thought, I wonder if anyone who I know and who I watch on the internet has reviewed this already. And yeah, as soon as I scrolled down on the page, of course, ETA Prime has covered this, and of course, you should go and watch ETA Prime's video on it. He has hands-on experience with it. It is very detailed, and if you are anything like me, you will see this and be very, very impressed by it. And despite the fact that, as I mentioned, you don't have access to GPIO pins in this, I don't need access to the GPIO pins for all of my Raspberry Pis. In fact, what I'd quite like is a nice little box that I can just sit about the place, that I can attach a very small screen to and maybe use that instead of a laptop in the flat for when I want to do work, just with wireless keyboard, wireless mouse, wireless monitor, who knows. But this is a very, very nice iteration on the case for a Raspberry Pi. I mean, look at it, that thing looks super professional. Honestly, if you told me that that was just a mini PC that you could just buy in a shop, I'd believe you. It's amazing. Anyway, the DeskPi Pro case is available for pre-order. You can pre-order it directly from Seed Studio, who are the manufacturers of it, and it will be $54.99 on pre-order. And estimated availability, oh, that's a difficult thing to say. Estimated availability date is October 15th, 2020. And once again, it is time for the mystery box competition. That is right, this is a box of mystery. It is a mystery box. It has mystery things inside, and every week since I've started the show, I've reached inside to get something out for someone to win. So, good rummage, good rummage, good rummage, and you are a power adapter. Okay, it's finally happened. Every week we've done this show, I've given away something amazing, and this unless I'm getting this wrong, this is literally just a power adapter. You have lots of little nibs for attaching things to. This is a power adapter that only works for people in European countries as well. It gets better and better. Okay, what are we going to do about this then? I did warn every week that this is a mystery box competition, and that obviously it doesn't cost anything to enter, and that you might win something that's a bit unuseful, because obviously anyone outside of Europe is not going to get any use of this. Hey, maybe you live in Europe and you're a fan of this show and you commented on last week's video and you're getting super excited right now. But yes, this is our prize for this week. Let's find a winner. And the winner of this fine, high quality 3 to 12 volts DC power supply is Richard Perrott. Although I could just send you out a power supply like this, so I dug into the personal supply of things that I will never get around to playing with, as I have more than one or too many of them. And I'm also going to throw in a Wemos D1 Mini. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but this is the slightly smaller version of the kind of popular Node MCU board. There's an ESP 8266 on it, and is great for little home automation things. And of course, the ubiquitous blue pill. This is an STM32 equipped little microcontroller board. So I'll stick both of these in the box as well, and maybe you will get some fun use out of them. But yes, thank you for entering the competition, Richard. As I mentioned earlier, anyone who comments on any of our videos can be entered into the mystery box competition, and the mystery box is looking a little bit thin, but do not worry, it shall be refilled. But for now, let's get back to the show. And we move on to funding website things. And what better place to start than the Micro WS2812 2020 RGB LED matrix, which is a name, but behind the name is a very cute looking little RGB matrix. Now these things are really small. As you see here, 25 by 25 millimeters. Yeah, that's really, really small for so many LEDs. It's kind of amazing because they are 8 by 8 pixels, and yeah, as you can see, they are addressable. And there's a couple of things about this that I really like. I mean, it's obviously a bit of a meme that it's so very, very small. You're going to just be using this for fun. It's got almost no practical use, and that's amazing. That makes me want it even more. This is just a fun, tiny, shiny thing, and there's nothing better in the world than that. Although, to be serious for a moment, they do look very good. They do look like very fast and responsive, and something that I really like about this is that they run at 5 volts or 3.3 volts. Which is, yeah, sort of incredible. If that's the case, then you're going to be able to just use these probably a little bit more gung-ho than you would normal LED strips, because, you know, there's always people on the internet who are shouting at people for plugging LED strips straight into Arduinos, with good reason. It's going to pull too much current and it's going to fry the thing. I get that. But yeah, I think this is a very nice little idea, and it's a very easy way to get people into the idea of using LED matrices. I'll be interested to see what kind of library they come up with, but they do actually have open source documentation available. But yes, as you can see, it's fairly simple at this stage. The schematic, the PCB design, and then how to use, which is just a diagram showing the direction the LEDs move. This one is yet to launch, though I will leave a link to it in the description of this video, so if you want to, you can sign up to receive updates on the project. Obviously no idea about how much it'll cost when it comes out, but tiny little daisy-chainable, low-power LED matrices, yeah, I'm in. I like. Is matrices really the plural noun for matrix? Is it one matrix, two matrices? Two matrices. Two matrices. Okay, get on with the show here. Moving on to 8 Mosfet, a stackable, DIN rail mountable, solid-state power driver for Raspberry Pis and other SBC and MCU platforms. Now, presumably when it says other SBC and MCU platforms, it's referring to the fact that it is a header that sits on the Raspberry Pi pins, which is obviously a very widely used thing. This is basically a different form of high-powered relay board. Now, a lot of people probably have experience with those blue relay boards with the 8 relays on them that click and you can attach things to them, and the very first time you got one, you probably wired a lamp up to it, and if you're anything like me, it was before you knew about electricity and you came very, very close to killing yourself. This is in exactly the same spirit as that. sort of. But no, in short, this uses MOSFETs rather than relays. And in the time since I almost killed myself that very first time with the relay, I've learned a couple of things. That the MOSFETs are actually slightly more reliable, and that they can switch a little bit faster, and I believe are slightly better with DC current, because relays can fail in those situations. They literally say that in the first paragraph here. Okay, yeah. I don't know, this is something that I'd be interested in looking at, just because it's been a while since I've actually used anything to switch high power. And part of the big plan for up here in the Attic of Dreams, when I finally get everything done, is to have all of the lighting both hand switchable and online switchable, so that when it does come to filming the show, for example, I can just say, you know, turn the show lights on or whatever, and then the normal lights will flick out, and these daylight bulbs I use to light the show will turn on automatically. If I was going to do something like that, this would be a pretty handy little thing to have. Anyway, I imagine a lot of other people will use it for much more home automated tasks, and as many people use DIN racks in their home automation and home server boxes, this is of course, as it says, DIN rack mountable. And it shows you a couple of options for mounting it with a Pi right here. This is the thing that I found quite nice about it though. Like I said at the start, this is a hat that will work perfectly happily with any Raspberry Pi oriented board, because they all share a lot of the same pins, but they've actually thought one step further than that. As I'm sure most of you know, most Raspberry Pi hats can actually work with most other microcontrollers. You just have to do all of the plumbing yourself and get everything plugged into the same way. And they've kind of come halfway on that, it looks like, in that there are actually traces for making everything work with a bunch of different boards, like Arduino Nano, Arduino Uno, Teensy Feather, and ESP32. And as part of a kit, you can actually attach the correct pins to make it work for you. This PCB design explains what I just did better than I could with words. This is clearly something that's had a lot of thought put into it, and as always with things that haven't been launched quite yet, there's a couple of ways you can go about this. I will leave a link to it in the description of this video, but I'm almost certain that when it launches we will be coming back to this to find out how much they are going to ask for it in terms of cost, and to see obviously whether they reach their funding goal. And just before we move on from crowd supply, the skull. Not just the skull, but the skull capture the flag. Yes, this is a CTF in hardware form, which I want to include, not because it sounds cool, but because I have no idea what it will be like. This is the entirety of their launch page. A skull, red eyes, gold tooth, and can you hack into AT tiny brain? Well, there's a relatively large clue as to what the brain is going to be. Centuries ago, she was queen of the pirates. Now you are holding her skull in your hands. A tiny piece of her mind remains within, barely alive, and it holds a dark secret. All right, I'm going to stop LARPing now. But yeah, this is kind of compelling, isn't it? I wonder what it's going to be. I wonder what it's going to be made of. I know this is just a sketch, but seeing the lines on it like this makes me think 3D printed skull that you have to sort of hack your way into as a sort of physical hardware CTF. I know I won't be smart enough to complete it myself, but oh wow, I just love projects like this so much, so inventive, and yeah, there's absolutely no reason for me to spend my money on it, and I'm absolutely going to. There's just no way of stopping me. Anyway, you know the drill. There'll be a link in the description, or you can just subscribe directly to the project in order to get updates on it. Moving over to Kickstarter and the Remodo X, which is a remote for the Raspberry Pi. Now, I'm sure you've seen remotes for the Raspberry Pi before. In fact, many projects for the Raspberry Pi, beginner projects, are turning another remote into a remote you can use with the Raspberry Pi using infrared sniffing and all that kind of stuff. This is not that. This is a bespoke device that uses Bluetooth low energy, in order to talk to your Raspberry Pi and make it do anything, really. That's kind of how Raspberry Pis work, isn't it? It is, however, clear from the promotional materials that this is designed to be something that is used as part of a smart home setup. The idea that the remote is essentially just 4 buttons that can be programmed to do different things, but like most things these days, what you can do with those 4 buttons is actually quite a lot. I would be very surprised if this wasn't as equally loved by kind of hackers and people that want to do their own thing with it, as people who literally just want to use it as a television remote for a little media server that has things like Netflix or Kodi or Plex and all of that good stuff on it. Now, this is the part I thought was sort of funny, and it's a bit of a meme again. I used that word twice in this episode, I apologize. But yeah, you can use it to scroll up and down on your phone or your tablet, which isn't the whole idea of us having phones and tablets, is that we have them in the hand and the screen. Anyway, but product stretch aside, this is probably one of the nicest kind of remote projects that I've seen. Very simple, very nice design, an app which allows you to assign what all of the buttons do in different contexts. And as I mentioned, long presses and short presses do different things. And yeah, you can use it to do anything you would do on your Raspberry Pi. So I feel like what is going to make this a success or not is this app. If the app has been well integrated with everything and it is easy to use, then this thing could absolutely fly. Because really, beyond kind of setting something simple up on the Raspberry Pi, if you are someone who's using it as a media server and who isn't really interested in getting into the thick of it and setting things up yourself, you're not going to try something that needs a hell of a lot of setup if setting it up felt like it was quite a lot to do in the first place anyway. So yeah, this does look like a kind of interesting device. For me, I don't really care about a Netflix or smartphone thing, but a Bluetooth low energy remote that won't run out, that has a find me feature on it. I haven't mentioned that yet. If you press a button in the app and you've lost the remote, it starts to vibrate like a phone so you can find it. And that presumably has an API that I can hack into and use for things. Yeah, that's cool. That's something I'm very interested in. And I think this is something that they're thinking about as well, because they're listing so many possible things you can use it for, and most of these things are designed to appeal to people who maybe, as I said, don't want to get quite as in the weeds and aren't as obsessed with doing everything themselves as people like I am. But as well as controlling home automation projects and Netflix and all of that kind of stuff, it mentions down here there's things like the presentation remote, so you can use it for doing presentations if you work in an office. And the universal IR control, which is a nice touch, which I don't think they necessarily needed to put in, but it has, has infrared. It has an infrared blaster in there, so you can use it as a normal TV remote, or if you're really, really evil, you can program it to be a TV be gone and turn off every single television that you come into contact with. But you didn't hear that from me. Anyway, it's been a very, very waffly show for me. In terms of price, they are only 17 euros if you go for the limited beta, which I don't know exactly what the difference will be. It's the off-tool version of Remoto X Gunmetal Grey with a pre-launch testing version of the mobile app. So essentially you are a beta tester if you buy the cheaper version. But I still think that's kind of cool, because presumably whatever happens with the hardware in the beta test, it's only going to really be the software implementation that changes. So you're getting everything cheaper and you get to be part of the beta project for this device. And if you do just want to get a release Remoto X, it is around 25 euros, and they come in gunmetal grey, as you can see over here, and also orange, as you can see there. But yeah, as I said at the start, this isn't the first Raspberry Pi remote that we've seen, but it does seem to be one of the nicer implementations of it so far. And yeah, a Bluetooth Low Energy Realtek chip and an app for both iOS and Android. If it does exactly what it says it's going to do, this thing's going to be pretty cool. So if you want to back it, I will leave a link to it in the description. I imagine this won't have too much problem getting to its goal, given that they only want 5,469 euros to launch this thing, and they've already got about half of that goal already. As I've mentioned for certain products in the past, I think sometimes these funding campaigns are maybe more just for the exposure, because it seems like a hell of a lot of development has gone into this already. But yes, there'll be a link to this in the description of the video. I'm going to end off this week's show with just a few projects I've seen on the internet this week. Starting with this little Pi Zero build, which is very simple but very useful. In fact, the clue is in the title, how to build a plug-in Pi Zero display and show something useful. And the build itself is simplicity itself, and that's one of the reasons that this really appeals to me. Rather than go through the entire article, of course, I will leave it up to you to read through it if you want. But in brief, this is the idea that rather than having trailing wires all over the place or some large screen on a wall, the builder, Jamie Bailey, just wanted something simple that can be plugged into the kitchen to show information about various sensor points around his house. And the way he decided to do it was nice and simple. You have a USB plug-in charger here and a case for the Pi, a little OLED display from Adafruit that fits onto the pins of the Raspberry Pi Zero, and then a large to small USB converter here. However, it didn't go necessarily smoothly the first time he tried to do it, but this was easily fixed by using a couple of smaller adapters. But anyway, that's besides the point. The idea here is that while it does look a little bit toppily, this is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a very small thing you can just plug into any wall device and it will connect to the network and give you some information. In this case, he chose to display temperature and humidity from sensors both in the attic, in the crawl space, and outside the building, along with the IP address of the Pi Zero in case he needs to SSH into it to make any changes. But you could, of course, put absolutely anything on here. And if you were to add, say, a screen with a little buzzer speaker or something on it, you could even if you really wanted to, have it so that it displays new tweets or things like that to you, although I don't know if another screen with yet more social media in our lives is going to do any of us any good. But this isn't just a show and tell. This goes through in great detail how it was put together. So if you did want to come up with something like this for yourself, you can, of course, follow this. And what with this being a Raspberry Pi Zero, you could easily adapt this to any other Raspberry Pi. These kind of good walkthroughs are fantastic and fascinating reads. And as I say so often, even if you aren't really into the idea of building one of these yourself, give this a read. You're likely to pick up some useful information that will twig in your brain in the future when you're working on your own project, even if it's very different to this one. And now onto a DIY digital guitar pedal, which uses a Raspberry Pi. Now, this is something I just stumbled across, and this is the second video of what I believe will be 3. Yeah, this is a fully digital build for making a guitar pedal using a Raspberry Pi and a few other components. And as you can hear, the results are pretty good.
Yeah,
So this second video that so far I've just kind of skimmed through, I'm really looking forward to looking at it in more detail later on today when I have the time. It appears to be just an absolute piece-by-piece walkthrough as to how you can create these effects in code from scratch. Now, as I say, there's going to be a few other elements to this. As someone who, as I've said on the show many times, has tried to make their own synthesizers of various types using microcontrollers. I've tried to make some analog synthesizers. More recently, I've been trying to use Bella to learn all of the bits of audio synthesis and digital signal processing that I never learned because I never actually studied it. This is very much of that ilk. And if you are someone who wants to build something from scratch, this is a fantastic place to start. The second video of this is the one that I'm going to link in the description for this show, but in the description of his video is the first one, which also tells you exactly how it has been put together, showing you all of the parts that he used. And interestingly enough, I can't speak to the entire hardware build because, again, I haven't built this myself, and I've really just had a kind of little skim through this. I discovered this last when I was researching this week's show, and it was so cool I really wanted to put it in. Usually I spend a bit more time reading something up, but I was just too excited and I had to put it in. One thing I did notice, which is cool, is it uses exactly the same super cheap ADC that I have used on a couple of different projects when I've been trying to mix analog and digital signal processing. Now, in my experience, they haven't always gone well, but it's got nothing to do with this unit. For €1.30, these things are incredible. 4-channel, 16-bit I2C devices that can change analog signals into digital signals for your Raspberry Pi, Arduino, whatever. They're used for so many things in the industry, but as a musician, these things are fantastic. Anyway, back to the video series. The YouTube channel is Hyllis, Hyllis, and as I said, I will definitely be linking the second video in the description, as that's the one that is most current, but both of them are very, very interesting, and it goes through, all of the bits and pieces that he uses in order to build his, and I have very much spotted the fact that it is a cardboard box being used here, and you know how I feel about that. I'm very much down for cardboard box builds. And since I just mentioned it, quite a while ago on the show I mentioned that Bella have been running this digital signal processing course, which is aimed at the Bella boards themselves, but is just a fantastic thing that is this is a full course on digital signal processing at a university level by a guy who teaches it at a university. I've obviously waxed lyrical about how much I love the Bella project before, but this is still ongoing. This is the most recent video released in October 2020. They now have 14 very, very highly detailed lectures on digital signal processing. If you are interested in any way about making music from code, especially using small little microcontrollers like Bella, or presumably something else. I haven't really thought about how you could attach that to other things, because I think all the code examples use the Bella library, but all of the theory here is completely divorced from any singular microcontroller. You could watch this and learn enough digital signal processing to program your own sound using any programming language and almost any device that will run at a fast enough speed in order to keep up with the audio signal processing. I can't state enough that this is, after all the years I've tried to learn this, the first course that has really made a lot of this stuff stick for me as a non-professional and self-taught coder. I highly recommend that if you're into music and code, checking it out. And finally, this is less a project, more just a bit of news. Visual Studio Code is now officially supported on ARM Linux, or Linux ARM as it says here, and yeah, as you can see, available for both ARM version 7 and ARM 64 architectures. So this, you can officially use it on a Raspberry Pi or a Chromebook or other ARM-based devices. I will leave a link to this page in the description, and there's a simple link to the downloader right here. But we should not forget that just because it is although just because it is now officially supported, we should not forget the fantastic work of the Head Melted crew. I don't know if this is one person or whether this is a group of people, but yes, headmelted.com, these are the people that have been doing community builds of Visual Studio Code for a while. And I have been using Visual Studio Code, or Code OSS as it is called in the community build, on my Raspberry Pi and on my Chromebook for some time, and it is just flawless, it just works. So yeah, it is very, very nice that we are getting official releases, send a thank you to these guys if you have ever used this version, if you do decide to move over to the official builds, because this has been my go-to for programming on ARM for some time. So that was our show for this week. I hope my waffling didn't get to you too much. I'm still adjusting to doing this show with cold hands. Maybe it's time that I invested in a heater. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be here again next week. Leave a comment on the video if you'd like to enter the mystery box competition. And as always, we'd appreciate it if you shared the show with your friends. But for now, have a safe and creative week. Take care.